is David Lichtenstein, and welcome to the Yeshiva Shalmaila. This week, well, it's the week of Megillas Esther. So what are we going to be speaking about? Women and learning, women's issues. You know, Esther saved Khal Yisrael. It's an appropriate time to be speaking about women's learning and a number of other women's issues. We will have Mrs. Miriam Kosman, an author and a lecturer from Bnei Brak, author of Circle, Arrow, and Spiral, expert in gender in Judaism. She'll be speaking about women learning. Should women be learning Gemara? You'll hear we have a lady who has a Khal. One of our guests will be a Haredi woman who has a Khal. From Yerushalayim, Rabbi Wasserman about surviving in the workplace, Beruchnius, both spiritually as well as halachically, what you're allowed to do in the workplace, what you shouldn't be doing in the workplace. He's the author of Making It Work. He has some of the most fabulous haskamas you'll see on a sefer today. Another guest from Eretz Yisrael, Rebbitzen, Tzipporah, a well-known speaker and author. We have Rabbi Nesanel, a Chassidish Rav and lecturer in Yerushalayim, a Mechanech. He'll be speaking about the place of women in Judaism from a Chassidish point of view. And we will have Mrs. Penina Pfeiffer, who has a Khal for women in Yerushalayim. All our guests this week are from Eretz Yisrael. One of the things we want to speak about is how do women stay connected after you go to work? Men have minyanim 3 times a day, daf yomi or smichas chaver or some other chavrusa, etc. What are women supposed to do? The husbands, how do you stay connected? And another issue, and I'm going to get criticized for this because I'm always said, you have bias. Yes, I do have bias. The disappearance of women from magazines, Mishpacha, Yated, etc. But more than that, even from wedding invitations, you don't find a woman's name on many wedding invitations, which is interesting because I saw the Stipler's invitation had his mother's name on it. Reb Chaim Brisker had Chaim and Lifsha Soloveitchik. If you learned in the Mir, Reb Lezer Yudel, we'll post all these online, had his wife on the invitation. Reb Moshe Simon Feinstein, by the Chassidish, the Sanzer Rebbe's granddaughter had her name on the invitation, daughter or granddaughter. So we'll post a bunch of these invitations. We're saying, why are women disappearing from invitations? Or if they were to redo the Torah today, obviously you can't say that, but metaphorically, would it be Avram Avinu, the Rayasai, V'hine Rayasai Ba'ayel? Right? So why are women disappearing? And what does that do as far as women having role models? You can't have a role model if, her name doesn't exist anywhere. So this is one of the questions that we'll be speaking about with a number of our guests. I want to say a vart before we start. And let me share the following thing. We did a program on Balei Tshuva. So afterwards, you get calls, letters. One Balei Tshuva sent it a thing. He asked me not to post it. And I won't say his name, of course. But he said, one of the hurtful things about my becoming a Balei Tshuva is, he said, my father fought in the American Army in World War II. He wanted to fight the Nazis, and he was always my hero. And then subsequently, he said, I realized he was Machal Shabbos, he ate on Yom Kippur, and when I became a Balei Tshuva, it sort of damaged both my image of my father as well as my relationship with my father. Well, listen to this one. We've done many about Khal. So one woman said, my husband leaving Khal was like a Holocaust to me. My entire identity from seminary was about how my husband is going to become a Rosh Yeshiva and a Rav. I feel like something inside of me died. Get this, look, when I left Yeshiva, I left Khal after 2 years, a year. I didn't want to start borrowing money. And I literally was afraid to show up. I didn't come back to yeshiva for like a year. I would daven locally, not want to be seen. It's such a betrayal for our entire chinuch. So I want to say, what does this have to do with Megillas Esther? Today the kids get dressed up. My beautiful, beautiful granddaughter got dressed up in a multicolored outfit, like Esther Hamalka, like do thousands and thousands of B'nai Yisrael. But let me share with you something. I think Esther, great heroine, had a very sad and unusual life and a difficult life. And let me tell you how I say that. It says, Vayihi b'mei Achashverosh, hu Achashverosh. So Rashi says, hu Achashverosh. Rashi says, he's that famous, terrible Russia Achashverosh. Russia mitchila v'atzayif. That's the hu Achashverosh, the extra. From the beginning, he was a Russia, and all the way at the end of the Megillah. What does it say at the end of the Megillah? That Mordechai was Ratza l'roivechav. He had to join the court of Achashverosh. So the Gemara says why? Because to be matzal nefashis. Achashverosh, it's not like, you ever see those kids' books where the dangerous lion makes friends with the mouse or the whoever it is and becomes so sweet and gentle, his whole personality changes. Well, people don't really change much. They change incrementally. But if somebody's a Russia, such a big Russia, Rashi says he didn't change. He remained a terrible person. And you know how evil of a person he was? Let me give you a few things. When you read the Megillah, you don't realize it. How many years did Achashverosh look for a wife? It says, Yavakshu, Lamelech, Naris, Psulos, Toivos, Mare. What did they do? And V'yikabtzu Lamelech, Kol Nara Psula, every beautiful girl from 120, worldwide they took. That's how many they took. 4 years, the Megillah says, 4.5 years he looked for a wife. And each night, it says, Be'erev hiba, u'baboiker hishava. She came from Haggai, she returned to Shashgaz. The Farshim say why? Because when she first came, she thought maybe this night he'll like me, he'll be moitzichein, and I'll become the wife. But it didn't work that way. So they were sent to Shashgaz. Once the Melech was intimate with the girl, she was never allowed to marry. So over this 4-year, every Erev, that means someplace between 1,000 and 1,500 of these beautiful girls lived the rest of their life as agunis. When you were dating, you could be a girl listening to this, a boy, and you said, I have to be careful not to hurt the other person's feelings. I don't want it to have an impact at them going forward. That maybe afterwards they should look back at me. I smiled too much when I knew it wasn't going anywhere. I don't want to hurt them. It'll have an impact. This monster, 1,500 women, right, girls, Naras Psulas, from those beautiful ones, they were finished after one night. He said, okay, we're going to put you up in the pillar. You stay there forever. You're never coming out. You're never getting married. You're never having a family. He wasn't worried about it. This is a monster. This is a psychopath like nothing you've ever seen today. And when you see in the Megillah, what does it say? She says, Kol asher lo yikare daitei lahamis. If he doesn't stick out to you, his wife, this is like an insane egomaniac that you've never encountered. He makes Saddam Hussein seem like a gentleman. Right? He's little. I don't know. I don't think psychopath describes him. And all this entire time, besides living with Saddam Hussein on steroids, right? For the rest of her life, she's still meanwhile married to Mordechai, like the Gemara says in Megillah and Daf Tezvav. And Taisa says he never gave her a get. Right? So here she is. She's the niece, or the wife of the Gadol Hadar. She's living with Saddam Hussein. She never gets a get. Imagine what it is living like with a psychopathic animal like this. But you know what? She's Esther Hamalka, and she's the heroine of the Megillah. And you know how she did it? And I'm surmising, it doesn't say this, but this is she said, Matoiv chalkeinu, manoim gerelenu. This is the life the Rabbi Shalom chose for me. This is my shlichus. This is my mission. I was sent to live with Saddam Hussein, right? And to be Saimach on the Heter of Karka Olam, to be Nival to a Shegitz and Url while married to the Gadol Hadar. It's astonishing how she didn't go insane from it. She said, this was my mission. And you know what this is? This means that this, sanitized view of what a hero is supposed to be, sterilized, sanitized view that certain books would give us. When he was 6 months, he made a bracha before he nursed from his mother. He never said Lashon Hara from the age of 6 months. If somebody said, these are mythical heroes, like from storybooks. The hero of the Megillah, Esther, had an incredibly difficult life and incredibly not, halachically difficult life, living with a guy in Url, a married woman, her entire life. He had no concept of Shabbos, Yom Tov. He said, what is she going to do, say no? And she was a hero. Because you know what? That was her shlichus. So many of us, we say, I would say to the wife of the Khal, your husband, Nebuch, had to leave and he had to work. Trust me, it's not a it's not a tipa shebiyam, right? It's keklipas hashub neged whatever has to, and what? And she's Esther, and what did Esther say? Kasvuni ladairis. Make sure my story is written and repeated every single year. And who knows? Maybe that's part of the message of Kasvuni ladairis. That what? That our image of a hero doesn't have to be some shiny book, shiny pages with mythical images, etc. A hero is somebody who does their shlichus, even if their shlichus is a nishpatamt and difficult, like Esther Hamalka's was. So you know what I say? Maybe you have a hero in your life that you didn't know about. Maybe your father, who, didn't fit into one of these storybooks, but he worked so hard. He tried so much to take care, to go to minyan. He tried to daven, or to do an act of kindness, or to whatever it may be. Maybe your spouse, and maybe even you yourself are a hero. When we have a new concept of what heroism is in the Torah, when Esther is Esther Hamalka, and she's the Sefer, she's arguably the most famous woman, the most repeated woman in Yiddishkeit. We read her story every year. If she is the hero, if she's the heroine, maybe we need to recalculate our view of what a hero is. A hero is somebody who does their shlichus, not somebody who fits into an hagiography. Let's go to our riddle of the week. I'm going to ask another riddle about the Megillah. So, everybody here, or many of you have learned the sugyas of Roidif and Ben Saira Myra. What would you say if somebody came to you, I asked you, let's say you were a Rav, and somebody says, there's some shegit someplace, he's walking around with a tzelem, and I hold it's a Chil Hashem. So I'm going to stand in front of him and show him and not bow down to him. And not only I'm going to incite him. What does it say Mordechai did? He showed him, here's a star that you sold yourself to me as an Eved. I'm going to incite him so that maybe he'll kill all the Jews in the world. But I'm going to make my point of Kiddush Hashem. I ask you, are you allowed to be masakin other people because you want to make a Kiddush Hashem? Right? Or, arguably, why? You're not a right. Could you be seen as a Roidif? And you're going to say Roidif needs a mice. You see, Lamashal, a Meiser, the Shulchan Aruch, the Paiskim say, why is a Meiser need to Lahara? Because he has a din of a Roidif. So you see, a Roidif is somebody, by instigating, you could become a Roidif too. So, Elamai, what are you going to say to me? Avodah Zarah is Yarek Val Yaver. Haman had the cross on his clothing. So Mordechai had to bow down because it's Yarek Val Yaver. I'll tell you very simple. It says, Mordechai Yoshev b'Shara Ir. Don't go to the Shara Ir. Stay in your house and don't instigate Adolf Hitler. If somebody's going to say Adolf Hitler's wearing a tzelem, so I'm going to go to the Berlin Square, I'm going to bow down to him, Al Yarek Val Yaver. What would you say? Don't go anywhere. Bleib in the heim. So my question is, halacha, how was Mordechai allowed to do what he did, since we know that even a Moisa could be a Roidif, somebody who instigates? Could be a Roidif. Why was Mordechai halachically allowed to do it? And by the way, in case you say, wow, this is off the charts, really the Gemara doesn't say it in this way. The Gemara on Yud Beis Amid Beis says, Ma asali Yehudi u'mashilim liyamini. Ma asali Yehudi. What did David HaMelech do? The Lekatle David l'Shimi. David should have killed Shimi ben Geri. Why? The Syalad me Mordechai. Mordechai was born from Shimi ben Gera. The Mikni be Haman. That he was the one who enraged Haman. He was the one who incited Haman. So this man Diyama holds that it would have been better if Mordechai wasn't born. Right? Rava. Not some wild. So Rava Amar. Knesset Yisrael Amar. Right? So my question is, we today obviously don't hold like Rava, and Mordechai is considered a hero. But you see, the Gemara tells in it, how was Mordechai allowed to do it? The Gemara doesn't use the word right. If the Gemara just says Shimi should have been killed. That is the riddle of the week. Let's go to our wonderful guest. We have on the phone with us from Bnei Brak, Miriam Kosman, who is a lecturer for Nefesh Yehudi. She's a world-famous lecturer. She's an expert. One of her main fields of study is gender and Torah. She wrote a book about it called Circle, Arrow, Spiral. We've had her on before. It was very well received. Welcome, Mrs. Kosman.
Thank you.
So we had on a woman who says she studies Gemara now, a Haredi woman actually. And, the whole concept of studying has become sort of, post last 100 years, post Sarah Shanira, post Chafetz Chaim's letter, post Zalman Sorotskin, etc. As maybe one of the experts on gender, halacha, what's your opinion? What's your feeling? I shouldn't say opinion. Give us some philosophy about women learning Gemara, Torah, Medrash, etc.
So I think it's important to, first of all, not to make sweeping generalizations about individual people. If a particular woman wants to learn Gemara and finds sipuk in it and it inspires her, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I don't think anybody would say there's anything wrong with it. I mean, there's always been, there's always been women throughout history who have done that.
Well, let me interrupt. I mean, just I'll throw some points to you. There's a letter from as recently as the Kloisenberger Rebbe, the Divrei Yatziv, and he was an Adam Gadol, where he quotes Yerushalayim. He brings Yerushalayim. There is a broad, which speaks about women learning. It's better to burn the Torah than to give the women the Torah. So there are certainly, you may call them outlier opinions, but it's certainly, I can't give you a laissez-faire on that.
Okay, I hear. I mean, I wasn't familiar with that, but I know that, there's a chidah where he talks about the idea that Chazal praise Buriya for learning, which must mean that if she was, that if a specific woman is open to it and is capable of it, then it's a positive thing. And there's a Prisha that says something similar. So there definitely is, who to be so mechon. But I think it's like totally missing the point. And I find this very often with my students, or when I hear from people talking to secular students about learning Gemara, so they like to point out to these, these women scholars throughout the generations who did this, who did that, and and look, we have classes like this, and the girls know halacha better than the boys, and the girls know hashkafa better than whatever, all these different kind of things. But to me, that's sort of missing the point, because I would really want to ask the question, why is it that Chazal and the Torah world in general has always channeled men and women in a different direction as far as learning is concerned, and in many areas, but specifically with learning. And I would want to know why is that? What is it meant to accomplish? And I think it's not so smart to say that women aren't. And I've heard people say this also. Their minds aren't equipped to do that. And I know what it says, but I think that in general, that was something that a lot of people said, before, in the beginning of the feminist movement, that, with all, good intentions, women just cannot be scientists, women just can't learn physics, women just can't be doctors, they can't be lawyers, and nothing negative about them, but they just can't do it. I mean, unless there's some very mystical reason why a woman couldn't learn Gemara, I think that it would defeat our purpose to insist that she couldn't if she really wanted to. I mean, I think a lot of men aren't so suitable to learning Gemara also. So I don't think it's specifically, I think of a woman, but I do think it's interesting. And my personal feeling is that Hashem and the Torah is, and I said this in my previous thing, is I think that it's very important to have two different voices. There always has to be two different voices. And I think that men were being encouraged to uphold a particular voice, and women were being encouraged to uphold a different voice. And I think either voice by itself can create a very distorted world.
Wait. Can I interrupt again? So when you said that there are those who said that women aren't suited for it, et cetera, are you of that mind that they are not suited, or are you saying they are suited, but they're supposed to have a different...
I mean, I find it very difficult to say women are anything or men are anything. My personal experience in life is that it's very hard to make those kind of statements. I've heard, there's all these lists that men are, use their seichel and women use their regesh, and, men are good at, women are good at multitasking and men are very focused. I don't know, in real life, I don't see it like that. I think there's many more differences. There's so many other things that impact on us besides our gender, like the culture we come from and our nationality and our level of education and our personality type, that I don't know. I'm not comfortable saying that women are not able to learn Gemara, just like I don't think necessarily men are, I think that learning Gemara is very hard. And I think a lot of it has to do with, the level of intellect. I don't think that women can't learn Gemara. Again, unless there's a metaphysical reason for that. But as far as we can tell with our brains, I don't think that there's any reason why women cannot become excellent at Gemara learning. I mean, they can do everything else. Why can't they do that? So that's why my question would be not, can they or can't they? The question would be more, should they or shouldn't they? And again, as I said, I think that for an individual woman, there's definitely precedence for an individual woman choosing that way of doing things. But I think the idea of saying that that's what women should be doing, I think a more honest approach would be, why haven't they been doing it until now? Like, what was going on there? I mean, we know there are always these two voices, Kosman Lebeis Yaakov and Shema B'ni Mufar Avicha Titosh Torah Simecha. Like, there was always two voices. So the question is, what does Gemara learning accomplish, and what does not learning Gemara accomplish?
Okay, very. Can I just? I'm going to make a lot of enemies here, but I feel if I have you on the phone, I have to ask the question. I mean, there is a strong Talmudic background for the concept of Nashim Daita and Kala.
Mm-hmm.
Gemara and Shabbos, it's in many different plays. How do you understand that as sort of the world expert on gender, halacha, Yiddish? How do you understand that?
But it says Nashim Daita and Kala. Is it talking about learning, or is it talking about something else?
It's talking about, the Gemara says, I'd be learning exactly. The Gemara says, Malabde Tiflis. I don't know if in that respect the Gemara uses Daitem Kalas. Let me pull out a Gemara. But it uses for many other things. I mean, Daitem Kalas, that's why for many areas they're not accepted. They're not accepted, testimony, etc. How is it gender? Do you understand that? With the concept, I'm using particularly the words Daita and Kalas, which I struggle with because 3 out of 7 Supreme Court justices today are women.
Right.
So how do you understand that?
Okay, so first of all, I don't think it has to. It's it doesn't. Those particular words, I don't think are talking about actual learning. But let's just say about learning, and the Rambam says that they're going to be mostly dvarim divrei havai. They're going to take it out of which you could also say tiflis or triviality or whatever it is. I have heard people say that nashim daitim kalos alehen, that in relation to their bina or whatever, maybe their das is kal. But I heard from a big gadol that the idea of nashim daitim kalos is that they're more easily influenced, and that to me is not necessarily a negative statement. In other words, I think that in today's world, the ability to not be stuck on one particular point. I mean, in other words, it's a particular character trait. The ability to be influenced is also the ability to be receptive to another person. It's the ability to be in a relationship. It's the ability to be permeable. And that's not necessarily a negative thing. I think, again, like I said today, if in the olden days we admired somebody who stuck to the same thing for their entire life and went to work from 9 to 5. Nowadays we're just impressed with somebody who's very open to ideas, very easily, can sway. You can sway them to something new and different. So that's what I think that's probably the way it was used. But as far as divrei havai, which is a different thing, I think it's very, very interesting that that's what the Rambam says about women and Gemara. But it's interesting, the Maharal uses that same word, havai, to talk about how people look at Agada, that they look at it as divrei havai, like trivialities. And the reason that's interesting to me is because I really think that halacha and Agada have very different voices. And again, and halacha is extremely structured, and it's a construct. It's an abstract construct. Or let's say halacha, learning Gemara is taking abstract concepts and building a world. It's like sort of a mathematical world. And Agada is a very different thing. It's like the Maharal says it's a tzir ha'olam. It describes the world. It's understanding the world that you live in. And I feel that those are two. It seems I think it's very, very important to say that you cannot really have a relationship with Hashem if you don't use your seichel. And it's not me that's saying this. The Rambam says it very clearly that a person can't have ahavas Hashem without their das. Right? Is that right? Al pi hadas pia ahava.
You could say that, correct?
Yeah. And I think it's important to say that even in a place where he says that that women and avadim, are Oved Hashem through Yira, he says, Shemachanech osam lavod Yira ad shetarba da'atan lavod mi'ava, v'yavdu mi'ava. So I think that is a very clear statement that, the goal is to serve with Ava, and Ava is only possible if you have Das. So I don't think that even when, even if you do want to say that they can't learn Gemara, I think that it's excruciatingly important that a person should be able to connect to Hashem through their das, through their seichel, through understanding. I think the real question you have to ask is, why do men learn Gemara? I mean, learning Gemara is such if you take a step back and you look at, the Orthodox world and how, the Jewish people have always had this Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam, and it's always been a tremendous value. And it's been, and when you think about it, doesn't make that much sense. I mean, like, what are people actually doing when they're learning Gemara? And what's fascinating about it is that so much of Yiddishkeit is passed through Gemara, when it's really like, it's not like there's so many philosophy books or psychology, it's really, that's what it is. It's what people are doing. The Torah scholars have been sitting and learning Gemara. And a lot of it is not relevant to day-to-day life. Even the Gemara itself says things that aren't relevant. The Ben Sora Mora or the Irani Dachas or whatever it is, that there's a point in learning it just to learn it. And even things that are, people even take pride in the fact that they're sitting and learning for years and years, and someone asks them a shayla, they don't know the answer because they're not learning in order to know what to do in this situation. So to me, it's much more interesting to say, why are men actually doing this? Like, what's the point of all this?
Okay. I mean, I can answer that, but I'd like to hear your thought.
I'm interested in hearing. What would you say?
Well, it depends. I mean, if you look at it, on some level, the Tanya addresses this at length, both in Yerushalayim and the Tanya, but it's about a relationship with the Yerushalayim. And the Torah is the closest relationship we could have with God. It's like understanding something. Just like when you have another human, you have a physical relationship, but a deeper relationship. You can hug and kiss your child when you look into your child and they explain to you how they're thinking and something that's happening in their day, and you appreciate it, and they recognize your appreciation. At that point, there's a bond and a trust and a level of understanding that transcends physicality.
Mm-hmm. So I can, yeah.
And at that point, we are merging our das, our understanding with das Elyon. And at that point, there's a tremendous sense of connection. There is a tremendous connection. That is from a philosophical point of view.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, I definitely hear that, and that's, it's very beautiful. But I mean, I think that again, if you look at this, you look at us from the outside, one would be hard put to understand that, because like I always, when I talk to my students about Shavuos, let's say we get together for Shavuos in Yerushalayim, we have a seminar. So can you talk about this beautiful thing with being Makabel, the Torah, and this and that? If you were going to Beis Medrash and listen to what they're actually doing, about this, this ox and that boar and this, garment, that whatever it is, it's extremely unspiritual and unmystical. Like what you just said about creating a bond with the Rebbeinu Shalom, I would imagine that learning Derech Hashem might give you that. But to learn to be sitting there arguing for hours on end about whether a kinyan means this or it means that is, again, what you said is what we say. But I'm saying is that I'm not. I think it's not intuitive.
Well, let me just go back to what you're saying. If you have a DMC, a very deep, meaningful conversation with one of your children, that's one way of creating a bond, right? And another way of creating a bond is sitting down with your child and doing their homework for an hour with them. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you have shown that you have a connection that doesn't have to be about, I love you and I care for you, but I'm expressing it by my understanding and working with the things that are meaningful to you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yes, if a kinyan is the ratzon of the kaviyachal, which may mean things beyond what we understand, but that's what his thing. So at that point, it's the equivalent of doing something. We're not talking about love. That would be more tefillah. We're actually talking about what is important to him, or where his das elyon is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, I hear that, and I would
say that in parenting, there are parents who think that parenting is having a deep, meaningful conversation with your child, and it is a part of parenting. And I would say, but a greater part of parenting is being there for your child and being in tune with their needs, or with the child, or with your spouse, or the people you love, and not sitting and talking deep things, but actually being there and connecting to them all the time, or most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I hear that. I hear that, but I think that and I very much hear that. I think that's what people are doing when they're learning, and I think that a lot of what they're doing when they're learning and the success of their learning experience is how much they've internalized that concept. I mean, the idea that we learn Torah for every purpose. I mean, again, it's supposed to be it's the greatest spiritual connection. Whether you want to memorialize somebody who was Mister, or whether it's for Shalema. And again, I don't think that the average person who was outside the story could understand why, sitting there and discussing contracts is a chus for the person. But I hear what you're saying. I hear where you're coming from. I think that a lot of men, for example, and there's a whole dialogue right now in Mishpacha about men who are working and how they there was a letter I think this week where people are saying that it's not necessarily that Gemara learning for an hour or two a day, the way they did it in yeshiva, is not necessarily giving them the koch that they need to deal with the onslaught of challenges to their whole value system that they're dealing with every single day. And I think that's what Chassidus also came to answer. In other words, aside from Gemara learning, there's also the relationship with Hashem and being aware that He's with you every day and being aware of Hashgacha Pratis and speaking to Him and davening and speaking, having a really personal relationship, which I don't think is necessarily encouraged that much. Maybe it's supposed to be a byproduct of learning Gemara. Maybe for many people it is. But to bring it back to the whole concept of men and women, my feeling is that there was always, that the way you describe what men are doing when they're learning Gemara, I think is one aspect of the relationship with Hashem. And I think traditionally it was the women that upheld that other voice. That people are not going to necessarily like this, but I think Chassidus in general is upholding the feminine voice. I mean, I think that's the voice that's being talked about. This relationship with Hashem, the personal connection, the simcha, which is talking about the parameters of feeling connected to Hashem. It's a more feminine voice. It's like it doesn't necessarily have to be just men and women who are upholding these two voices, but I think throughout history, whenever somebody went too much in the direction of that halachic, Talmudic, mathematical kind of voice, I think there's always been a pull in the opposite direction. And I would maintain in general over human history, it's the women who've been holding up that voice and the men who've been holding up the other voice. Now, I'm not saying, again, not that women could not hold up that voice, right? Because I think that they could learn Gemara if they wanted to, and if they were willing to put in the tremendous amount of time, and if they were dedicated enough, and if they whatever. But I feel that that's not necessarily, that's not the voice that they were given to uphold. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. And even though Nashim are, they don't. There's no chiyuv tefillah of gimel pamim b'yayim. I guess the argument would be is that because it's mitzvah seisha mangrama, I'm sorry, excuse me. Yes, I guess so, because it's mitzvah seisha mangrama. So therefore, their relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom transcends the 3 times chiyuv. They have other obligations, but the essence of their obligation is that relationship, and that transcends the physicality of actually having to get up and daven.
And I mean, the Rabbi makes it very clear that she has to daven from her heart every day, even if she doesn't say the form. And I think he's one of the few people who doesn't say that she has to daven the formal, the sweet tefillah for the day, but definitely that she has to talk to Hashem every day from her heart. She's mechuyev. So it's again that sort of that relationship, and I think that a woman, especially today, I think a woman in general, she is like a man has a chiyuv and he has to be kovei itim, and it's very structured what he's required to do. Whereas a woman, I think she has to keep her fingers on the pulse of her relationship with Hashem and to learn as much Torah as she needs in order to feel connected. That's the ultimate goal, and that's going to be very, very different. Historically, it's going to be different even in today. I mean, like if somebody is an intellectual type of person, and, I say this to my students, like if they're getting a degree, an academic degree in whatever it is, they need at least that level of Torah knowledge in order for there to even be a balance in their life. I mean, how much does Torah and Yiddishkeit, how much weight is it going to have in your life if it has no, and there are people, I have friends who never open a book ever. And I would not say in any way, shape, or form that, they're less connected to Hashem. There's different ways of connecting.
Okay, let me switch topics on you, Mrs. Kosman. you come from a great, Litvische background. At least I believe your father was a big Talmud and I believe you live in Bnei Brak. So when I was many years ago in Eretz Yisrael, some type of wedding, Reb Michal Feinstein was there, and Rav Shach was there. And this is many years ago, so I don't remember if I got all the names right. And Rav Shach was standing by the Mechitza, and he wanted to talk to Reb Michal's Rebbitzen. So he saw her, and he started calling, Lifsha, and she came, and they chatted for a few minutes, and that was it. And if you look at, let's say, the invitation of Reb Chaim to the Brisker Rav, it says she was named after her grandmother. So it says Chaim and Lifsha Soloveitchik, as the signatories of the invitation to the Brisker Rav. The Brisker Rav with his children, Chassidish sister, when the Tzipporah, his mother signed on the invitation, Rasha, right? I forgot the list. The Karelitz, yeah. And with the Telza, I had somebody who does one of my producers pull up a few of the invitations. If it was redone today, if we rewrote the Torah today, it would be Avram Avinu v'Reyasai. Right?
Yeah.
And it would be Megillus, Reyasai, Mordechai, Megillus Mordechai v'Reyasai. You know what I mean? And my question is, multi-pronged. And one is, do girls need models that, we there should be a model of a Jewish woman because 50% of our, religion are women, and the girls need models of greatness too, right? And two, what you call the feminine voice, which is, whatever it is, the voice of love, the voice of understanding, empathy, the ability to see things in 3 dimensions often, right? Do we diminish that voice when we don't, I'm calling you Mrs. Kosman, Miss Miriam Kosman. If you were appearing, it would be Mrs. Kosman. You wouldn't be allowed to mention your first name. Do these things diminish that voice when just one generation ago, I mean, we would mostly agree, I would, that Rosh Hach was an Adam Gadol, the Chaim Brisker was an Adam Gadol, the Brisker Rav was an Adam Gadol, the Tzipporah was an Adam Gadol. These were great people, and this is as recently, so from 3,500 years ago till the last generation, this was accepted. And more than accepted, the understanding of the importance of what you call the woman's voice, whatever it may be, of the importance of women in Khal Yisrael. Megillas Esther, right? She has the name, was understood, and suddenly something's moved very radically, and it keeps moving. First, with no voice, no pictures, no. I recently got a list somebody sent me of takonis and ger against women. I mean, it's hair raising. Right, and when we start moving, often the ramifications are not felt for many, many years. So, shouldn't we be speaking up? Like, why are we denigrating? Why are we putting down this powerful, this important voice?
So first of all, I couldn't let that mention of Megillas Esther to go past without connecting it to what we were just talking about. That I think it's fascinating that first of all, Megillas Esther is obviously. There's a tremendous amount there about the koach of the woman and what, the verse Vashti versus Esther. But I just want to point out that I think the whole avoda of Purim is a very feminine avoda because, this drinking, adolo yada, is really taking your da'as and your seichel and all that, distinguishing and discerning and judging and grading and comparing and just throwing it out the window. And for those 25 hours, you really enter into this feminine mode of just your lay, just your heart, just your relationship with Hashem. And I think it's fascinating that it says that the Rambam writes that at the end only the Chumash and Megillas Esther is going to be there because I think that's the voice that we're talking about. That's the ultimate voice in this world. We don't have the whole picture, so there has to be this constant deal on what the right thing to do is. But I do think that we're moving towards this feminine voice.
Let me just add on to what you're saying. Example, you speak the feminine voice. When Mordechai tells Esther what to do, he says, go into Achashverosh and plead for your nation. But she doesn't do that. Rashi says she decided she was going to plant the seeds of Kinna in Achashverosh. She understood, look, if it's me and Haman, I may lose. He may choose Haman. I mean, he had 1,500 women between me and him, one every night for a 4-year period, right? I don't know how important I am, but I understand how things work when you put jealousy into a man. So she used this voice to create what was ultimately the Yeshua of Megillah Esther, and not listening to the voice of Mordechai in this respect.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I hear what I hear where you're going with that. But as far as your main point, my feeling is like this: there's no question that there's a reaction as the outside world is getting worse and worse and worse, and they're living in a way that is like so incredibly contrary to every single thing we hold dear. So there is a reaction, and I think that the Gedarim of Tznius are there. And I think it's very important to make a distinction between Gedarim and Tznius and valuing women and thinking that their voice is worthwhile. I mean, I think at the same time that what you're talking about, that that there aren't pictures of women in the magazines, etc. I think it's very interesting to note that the two editors, of the Mishpacha magazine are women, and I think that the Ami certainly has like a huge influence on the Haredi world also. And I think that it's interesting that a person that writes an op-ed in the Mishpacha is reaching hundreds and thousands of people every week, or I don't know, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands, and whereas a rabbinical figure doesn't necessarily get that audience every single week. So I think that the idea that women are impacted, I think that it doesn't bother me what you just said. I don't think that there's a lack of women role models. I think that more and more, women are spreading their ideas and their way of looking at things in many, many different ways. And I think that they have a very, very strong voice. I think the fact that, a lot of the helping professions, women are there are more women than men. And I think that, in other words, the only way to do things is not the male way. And to me personally, the idea of like insisting that everything has to be according to the male way or it has no value, I think it's really a misunderstanding of the koch. I just think that it's not. I recently had spoke to a seminary, a very modern Orthodox seminary, and I started off the class by asking them if they could give me associations with the idea of woman, or the word woman. And they literally could not come up with one positive thing. Weak, passive, not assertive, does what she's told. There was nothing there, no nurturing, no understanding, no reaching across borders, no. Now, and these same girls will tell you very proudly that they learn Gemara, So, and again, I don't think this, this is not a criticism of that seminary, because I think whatever you have to do to keep people engaged today, within the realm of halacha, do what you need to do. But I think that, this idea that, and I think that even in the feminist movement, you have that. You have, different waves of feminism, the feminists that insist that everything has to be exactly the same. And nowadays, there's another voice that's coming up and saying, maybe we don't want to do it that way at all. Who says pictures are good altogether?
Well, what bothers me more than pictures are names and invitations. How the mother's name can't be in the invitation anymore.
Okay, whatever. So, social things don't get me very, whatever, they'll work it out. However they do invitations, and I could live with either way. That's my feeling. But I feel that it's a reaction. In other words, the less tznius there is in the world, and tznius is the kli for bracha.
I understand, but if the reaction is to preach this in the world, is to exercise women out, right?
But in what way are they exercising them out? How many of the articles?
When you have a mother and she can't have her name in the invitation, is the answer to preach this the disappearance of women? Or is the answer to make the women's voice clearer and to beautify, enhance the proper women's voice, or is it is there two different types of tznius? There's the Muslim element of tznius, where we cover and minimize and make the woman disappear, and make her, you could see her eyeballs. That's basically by many, at least the Wahhabi, etc. Many of the the more the frum, quote unquote Muslims. That's one level of tznius, and there's a level of tznius which means exclusivity, right? In other words, estates have big gates around them. Buckingham Palace has a thing. So that tznius means I recognize my value, and I'm special, and therefore I'm careful where I speak and what I don't speak, etc., because of I'm royalty. And it's different than the level of tznius of diminishing. And if we look in the Torah, our tznius, Sarah was Ba'al, but she was called Sarah. And when we remove her name, are we sliding towards the Muslim understanding of tznius and leaving the Yiddish way of tznius?
Mm-hmm. So I don't want to get on a bandstand about, invitations or pictures in the magazine. Like I said, I could live with either way. I don't think it's so crucial one way or the other. And I think that, but I do think that getting extremely hung up on these details is negating the fact that there is a tremendously strong female voice. And I think everybody recognizes that it exists and that it's getting louder. And I think that in a mystical way, because I believe that Hashem is moving us towards a perfected world, I think the fact that women can communicate today their ideas and, their thoughts and even their Torah thoughts in a way that doesn't require them, because of the internet or because of writing or because it's so much easier to print something or to put out a book, I think that that's something that Hashem is saying. In other words, the fact that a person can give over their ideas, which is what's important here, without having to, physically speak in front of an audience. And the fact that people can communicate and on so many different levels, and if anything, I would say that the feminine voice is getting too strong. In other words, I think that if you look at postmodern societies, we talked about last time, I think that they're going so far in the feminine direction that we're sort of falling off the other end. And the film world is not there, and the film world is pulling back very, very hard towards the male direction. But there is a balance that's going to be achieved. And, it just bothers me when I feel that when people talk about, feminine or the women's movement or women in halacha, it always boils down to me. It seems very superficial and trivial because I feel like the real discussion should really be what are the messages we want to give over? What is important? Or, what is the voice of the woman? What was Sarah's message? What was Esther's message? And I think it's based on what you said before. I think it's fascinating. The Maharal says that Achashverosh was so connected to Esther that he literally, it says it on the words Vayomer over there, it says he mamish switched off. He made the break between himself and Haman and switched to Esther because of the tremendous chibur he had to her. So, that's a very powerful voice. It's a voice that's able to destroy evil. So are you going to say that if the name is not on the invitation, then, I personally have had invitations for some of my children with my name and some without. I don't even remember which were which. Who cares? It's to me, extremely irrelevant. And I feel like what is relevant is, are you as a particular woman, does she understand, the gifts that she's bringing to the world? Is she able to develop it? Does she understand it? Does she have insight into it? And how is she going to be able to bring that forth? And it could be within her own family, and it could be outside her family. It could, So
as an author, if you were if your book was published without your name, would it bother you?
Yeah. That's a good question. I don't know why. I do know why, but how does that fit in with this whole thing?
No, we're talking about, a woman not being able to have her name on her child thing. Is that I would say that's at least as interesting as authoring a book, as authoring a child,
I hear. Okay, I have nothing to, whatever. Yes, it would have bothered me, and I don't know how to explain it. I don't know how,
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a societal kind of thing that you just, like I said, that society is trying to hold on to a certain kind of, and I just want to say that it's very much under attack. This whole, I think that the frum world is going through a lot of upheaval with all these changes in men and women, and the fact that the women are going to school and getting degrees, and the men are, the men who are still learning, whatever. There's a lot going on under the surface, and I sort of feel like to be in tune with what's going on and not hung up on these things, I think is really important.
Well, Mrs. Kosman, it's always an honor to have you on with us.
Thank you very much.
All the best. Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
We have on the phone with us from Yerushalayim, Rabbi Ari Wasserman, who has written a number of Sfarim. He's written Higyainei Parsha. He's written Making It Work for Men, and now he's making It Work, Women Surviving and Thriving at Work. I've seen many of his volumes of Sfarim. The Higyainei Parsha I've seen. It's a fabulous sefer. Welcome, Rabbi.
Thank you so much.
So, Rabbi, what are the challenges of women at work today?
There are many. I would start out by saying that the problems begin, the challenges begin. I don't like to say problems, but challenges is that a woman is, when leaving the seminary or leaving the whatever educational format that she's in, she's experienced in her whole life, learning in a Jewish environment, in a controlled environment, and when she leaves that, she doesn't have that connection to her rabbis, to her teachers, and she's going through a major transition, so very much like a fish out of the water without any structure there. So simply by leaving, regardless of going to a secular workplace, co-ed workplace or not, you're going to have a challenge. But when a woman goes on to work in the secular world, in particular with men, that causes a major culture shock because she's not used to having male-female interactions, not used to the immodest dress or the vulgar language and the conduct between men and women and foreign philosophies. The foreign philosophies is a very big problem nowadays. I have a woman who I was interviewing for the upcoming book on women's workplace challenges was talking about when she started working, and two coworkers were talking about, it was a woman who was talking about her wife. And she didn't understand what she was talking about, my wife, my wife, my wife. And she was like, but you're a woman, and how are you talking about your wife? So you have foreign philosophies that are totally contra to the Torah. So all of that gets challenged when you go into the secular workplace. So that is a real difficulty that we have that is it's just something that the woman is totally unused to and unprepared for, and hasn't been educated in the seminaries in a proper way. There are seminaries that do try to teach. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's what I want to ask. Do the seminaries prepare girls? Seminaries that know that a reasonable percentage of the girls will be out there. I'm on the board of Turo, and so many girls come in. They're becoming PTs, OT, all these different professions. The seminaries or schools say, okay, here's your first weekend job at your work, and some guy comes in and he says something, he makes a compliment, he asks you for, do they teach them the basic things, like how do you deal in a foreign society?
So it depends the seminary. I'm more familiar with the seminaries in Israel, and there are ones that are more attuned to it, like Meor, Rav Zachariah Greenwald, at Tzipporah. They are very aware of the issues in the secular workplace, and they do coach the girls. And it's very important that they do. In fact, one of the women I was speaking with said the most important thing that I heard in seminary was from the principal, who said you need to go to 2 shiurim every week. And she said that had such a demonstrable difference on my staying connected to Khal Yisrael, going to those two shiurim every single week. So it depends the seminary, but I would say for the most part it is lacking, and there needs to be a lot much more chinuch. I was speaking to some women about what they're taught, and they said, they taught us yichud, but they don't teach the reality of yichud. They need to get down to more of the reality and relate it to the workplace than just teaching the concepts. What do you do when a man comes and gives you a hug? What do you do when he reaches out his hand and you don't want to embarrass him? All of these experiences that come up, they have to be taught, because the more we teach the women before they go out, it will dramatically decrease the challenges and the stress that they experience, because inevitably there's a lot of challenge, inevitably there's a lot of stress. So the more we can educate them, the yeshivas do basically nothing. I don't want to say all of the yeshivas, but they feel it's not the response. I'm talking about the ones in Eretz Yisrael. I know that there are some classes at Yeshiva University that does help the guys, and I know there was a new dean that was just hired for the Saisim's Business School, and one of his focuses, there was an interview about him. He happens to be my brother, Noam Wasserman. So there was an interview of him, and he says what his focus is going to be is getting the guys ready to work 9 to 5, not literally 9 to 5, but also how to act from 5 to 9. In other words, how to act as a yid all the time. So that definitely will become even more of a focus at YU. And hopefully, as on the board of Turo, you should push the same there.
So let me ask you a question, Rabbi Wasserman. So you were going to speak about the challenges in the workplace. I know, do the seminaries, and look, it's been a long time since I had a daughter in seminary. I don't know, it's not that long. I guess I could ask her. But do they teach them, besides the issues that could come up, like you say, dealing with LBDGQ and the rest of the alphabet, as well as yichud, etc.? Do they also teach that's the shomer? Do they also teach the zachar? Like, guys are taught you have to have a shear all the time. I mean, is there some type of girls? You're going to go out to the workplace. The world is on fire. If you don't have a few shiurim a week, you're going to lose all connectivity. right? I don't know of any organization of women's shiurim on a weekly or a bi-weekly basis to keep the girls connected. And it's sort of iterative. Like when Sarah Shaniris started, there were no Beis Yaakovs at all. And when she said, hey, girls' education, people thought she was, really off the range. And today everybody just accepts it as a standard. In fact, a girl who doesn't go to school would be seen as sort of a misfit. Well, is the next step, now that we've been so successful, having such an incredible group of Beis Yaakov, the brightest and the best girls coming out of Beis Yaakov. It's interesting. We have an office in Lakewood. We employ many girls, and I have, secular people who interact with us, and they say, wow, you have such incredibly bright group of employees. It's mostly, Khal wives. So, but are they taught, well, that's a very religious environment, but are they taught, hey, we were so successful, there could be so many girls going out to work. What should your life be after you go to work? It's not Daf Yomi, but it should be something pretty darn close to Daf Yomi.
There are some seminaries that will teach some of these issues, but on a more limited basis. Like last year, I spoke at a seminary to the Meor. I spoke at a seminary at Neve. I spoke at Michlala last year. So that was 3 seminaries, but we're talking about isolated classes, to go in and spend 2 times speaking about Marasayan in the Treif restaurant and interactions with men and shaking hands with men, and what do you do if he gives you a hug? So it's 1 or 2 times. I think it needs to be a full curriculum. They need to have a full year. I give these classes in Or Sameach, and I taught it also in Beitar to a bunch of Chassidim in Hebrew about all of the challenges there. And I think it needs to be built into the regular course load of individuals. At least in the Israeli seminaries where the Israeli girls go, they are teaching them what's called the maslulim, which is after 12th grade. They teach them certain trades, certain professions, for example, teaching or programming, accounting. But this is something that is in the Israeli seminaries for the most part not built in. I know Rav Rubin, who wrote the Orcha Shabbos, has put out certain publications. He has something short on Yichud. There's I think it's an organization. I'm not sure. I haven't really opened it up, but I have in front of me another publication called Khal. It's about guidance, legal and financial guidance for women, for Haredi women who are working. They have there's some other publication for them on what to do with kashrus in the workplace. But for the most part, I don't see as far as I've seen, a large effort to really educate them. They may be getting now somewhat of an education as to the professional side of things, but not to the actual challenges that will be experienced in the workplace. And I think that has to be number one focus.
So give us, Rabbi Wasserman, give us your 5 top challenges that a frum girl is going to have in the workplace. My name is Chana. I just left. Give me some seminary. I've been so far from this. BJJ, Malot, whatever they're called. I got to work. I got a job as what? I'm a design. I'm doing graphics for Apple. Walk me through it. What do I have to be aware of?
Okay, so I'll take a step back. And when I started writing the women's book, I thought it'd be fairly easy to go from the book Making It Work, which wasn't intended to be for men. It was meant to be just for workplace, but it was more male bent. And I thought it'd be easy to make certain changes to the book and put out a female book. So when I started speaking with women, in the end of the day, I spoke with 50 women in 5 continents, from Baalei Tshuva all the way to Satmar Chassidim. It turned out that the challenges for women are dramatically different than the challenges for men. There is some overlap, but for the most part, men have more, I would say, the halachic challenges. And when it comes to women, they certainly have the halachic challenges, but more the philosophical, more the identity, who I am challenges is something that really plagues them. So to answer your question, I'm just looking at the table of contents of the book. I would say balancing work, religion, and home life is a real challenge. How do you balance everything? You've got work, you've got a career. So a woman told me a story that she had a newborn and she was started a new job, and they walked in, and I think it was like a 6-month-old son was sitting on the floor, a year-old son, with an open bottle of Tylenol. And with the Tylenol spilled all over the place. Did he have any of it? She calls her boss. She says, I got to take my kid to the ER, and the boss says, no, you have to be here. You have to stick with the hours. So that's a real issue, is the juggling act of balancing work, religion, and home life. That's a real challenge. And, the topic of the show, how do you stay connected? If you're too busy balancing work, religion, and home life, it's very difficult to stay focused when you got to deal with your kid going to the ER and your boss that's breathing down your back. How does religion come into play? So I'd say that's one major challenge. Another one, what's my role in life? You have a real split personality. The most extreme example of the women that I spoke with is a woman who lives in a very Haredi neighborhood in Yerushalayim. She supports her husband learning in a Choshen Mishpat Kollel, but she works at a large technology firm in Tel Aviv, and she's going back and forth, and she's here wearing a snood, and she's there also wearing a snood, but you're dealing with a lot of people, Jewish, non-Jewish, non-observant, and you're one of two people who keep mahadrin, and you have a treif kitchen that serves lobster there. So who am I? Am I working? Am I supporting my husband? What's my priority here? So that's definitely another major challenge. I say the biggest area of challenge is dealing with men. You have the issues of the slippery slope, interacting with men for the first time. Women were telling me, when I'm in my neighborhood, I don't even see men. At the makolet, I say hello to the guy and thank you, but that's it. Even the rabbi, my husband asks the questions to, and when I'm at work, I'm interacting constantly with men. So that's a real challenge as well, just the interactions and the speaking, and the safeguards for men. It turns out the book doesn't go into verticals of what happens if you're an attorney, what happens if you're an engineer, but the one area that it does get into is the healthcare area. And healthcare is a really problematic area when it comes to interactions, because it's very stressful, and you're constantly interaction with men and women and touching, etc. So I say that's the biggest category when it comes to men and women issues. One story that just popped into my mind. There was a woman who was working in the emergency room, and she was overnight. You have to do your overnights, and what do you do when it's quiet? You have the room where all the residents are, and you're lying there and trying to sleep, and a guy is also resident. He walks in and he's trying, there's a problem with yichud there. And she asked to talk. He said, you can't be in there. She had to be sitting outside the room all night. You haven't slept for 24 hours, and you have to have a yichud problem. You have to be sitting outside. So yichud, you have shaking hands, you have tznius issues, scrubs, for example. How do you do that? So some of the women were telling me that they would double. You have the V in the front, so they would wear double scrubs, one underneath and turn it around, and then one in front and have a shell underneath to make sure that they're adhering to tznius despite having to be in the operating room. I'd just move on to another one, the foreign values in the workplace, that you have the focus on materialism, and not the focus on ruchnius. So I'd say that's another big problem. The going out after work, you have drinking. That's a very common thing. You have what they call gibush in Hebrew, that you try to have achdus of everyone. So you have the goings, you go the overnights and the weekends. One woman was telling me that they said it's casual, and there she is in her long skirt, and people are making fun of her. This is casual. That's casual for you. Why aren't you dressing down? Everyone's wearing bikinis and bathing suits, and the men are doing the same, and she's sitting on the side reading a book. I'd say another really big issue is fitting in. And what I mean there is both fitting in at work and fitting in not at work. And when it comes to fitting at work, we really don't want to be fitting in so much. Am levadad yishkon, we know we're different, and everyone else knows we're different, but it's difficult to connect to people at work. And when you go home, if you live in a community that people aren't working, you don't really have a common language to speak with people about. If most of the people are either not working or they're working at in a Beis Yaakov's, and there you are, and you're working at a law office, or you're working as a doctor or a nurse or whatever it may be, you don't have a common language. So a number of the women said they just don't have friends, and you don't have good friends at work, and that's probably a positive thing, and you don't have friends back at where you live because you don't have a common language together.
Rabbi Wasserman, Rabbi, let me interrupt. Given all of this, would you send your daughter to work? Let's say she wanted to learn law. Would you let her become a lawyer at some law firm in Tel Aviv where she's the only frum girl?
Excellent question. And something that we grapple with, my wife and I grapple with all the time. You have to know it's based on the Rambam in Hilchos Deis says something very interesting. He says different people have different personalities, and some people are greedy, and some people don't want money, and some people have desires for materialism, and some people don't care. And so he goes through some people are happy, some people are sad, some people are friendly, some people are not friendly, and he talks about having an intrinsic nature, and then a little bit later he also talks about regardless we're influenced by our environment. So I think you have to consider when thinking about a woman, what should she go into, what occupation she should go into, and even independent of the occupation, she has a chosen occupation, where should she go to work given that occupation? We have to think about both the individual and where is she going to wind up. You know, if it's this hospital or that hospital, they may be very different. If it's this legal office in Tel Aviv and that legal office in Tel Aviv, it may be different, very, very different. So some of my daughters, I may say absolutely, but it depends where you wind up. And others, I would say, no, it's not appropriate. So I think you need to know the individual, and you need to get to that level of where that individual and the strengths and the weaknesses and desires, and where will that person actually go and work, given the career and the occupation. What does that mean? So,
well, I mean, the Rambam also does write Derech Adam Nimshach Achas Svivav, and also in Hilchos Deis.
Yes,
and, you know, people do get
both the individual and the impact of the Svivav. So even if you have all the strong, Rambam is saying, even if you have all the strong strengths in nature, you can still be impacted by, but still, the important thing is that
it's a pretty treacherous slope, isn't
it? It can be, depending on the individual. There are certain women that I spoke with that were actually strengthened by the adversity in the workplace, and it was incredibly inspiring. I'll tell you a story. There was one that told me that she worked in a place, and she had a coworker who was always talking about her dream car. My dream car, my dream car. And she was always talking about the car. Finally, she bought it, and she was elated. One day go by, two, and that's all she spoke about was her brand new car. Fourth day she comes into work, and she is destroyed. She's in despair. So the frum woman turns to her and says, what happened? Did you get in a car accident or something? She said, no, I was driving on the highway, loving my car, and my dream car, even better than my car, passed me by, and that's the car that I wanted. And what the frum lady learned from that is, look how terrible these values are. And Chazal tell us, Ezehu Asher Shameach Bechelko. And she was strengthened by knowing that the values of Khal Yisrael are that is stuff that is just not important to us. And we have to know we have to be happy with what we have. And she was strengthened from that. Anu mashkimim vehem mashkimim, right? That's for them, but that's not for us. So there are some people that are absolutely strengthened by seeing the depravity and that can be out there. So you really got to know the individual. It wasn't only her. There was another one also that told me as well that she's strengthened by looking at the materialism, and she knows that it's just irrelevant to us, that those values.
Right. So, Rabbi Wasserman, what would you recommend the girl who's going from seminary to work and doesn't want to lose her tzelem elokim, so to say, her milo, frumkeit, hashkafa, deis? What would you advise a young woman?
Okay, very, very important question. I'd start off by saying that women are a little bit disadvantaged relative to men, because men, even after leaving the structure of the yeshiva, they still go to shul, and they still have a certain kfiyas, a certain consistency, and they go to shul and they'll see the daf yomi there, and they have more peers that are around that are also working and have similar challenges. But women really may not have that. They're not going to shul. They're not having the daf yomi or whatever other kfiyus that is prone for, that's available for men. And also, if they don't have peers that are going through the same challenges, it's even more challenging. So I'd say I think there are three important concepts when discussing how we should strengthen the women, and it applies to men as well. But number one is consistency is very important. That's the concept of kovei itim l'Torah, having a kfiyus, consistency. That's number one. Number two, it's a very subjective thing. For example,
wait. When you say number one, Rabbi Wasserman, you say number one, Kvias itim LaTorah is, to my knowledge, I've never heard it in reference to women. I've heard it as reference to men.
No, I'm not saying. Yeah, it's only
but are you
for men.
That,
the concept of
no, but my question is, given that today the world, Chafetz Chaim writes that it's a terrible world out there and destructive. I mean, should there be an issue of some type of a kvias itim? And it doesn't obviously mean every day, but should a woman have once or twice a week some type of a sefer they learn together? It could be Reb Chaim Shmulevitz. It could be Nechama Leibowitz, right? There's so many fantastic. Should there be a concept of a kvias itim for women also?
I think it's a lovely idea. I don't think that every woman can do it, and I think when it comes to women, they have other ways that they connect as well. So when it comes to learning, I think it's a very subjective thing in what a woman should learn and how often. The ideal would be to learn. For a man, that's the oxygen. A frum man who's inspired is learning. It's very difficult for a man to stay inspired if he's not learning. But I did speak with a number of the women who were inspired, even if they didn't have a kvias, but they were able to be inspired and stay connected in another way. So we can divide up and talk about the learning and then the non-learning and how you stay connected. So when it comes to the learning, I'd say consistency. Kovei itim is for men, like every day, twice a day. V'agisa b'yomam v'layla, that's for men. But a woman should still have the concept of consistency. Number one. Number two, I'd say it's subjective what she does. And number three, she should put herself into situations that we would say mechayev herself, to obligate herself. My wife gave the example of if she can go to a shiur, sit in the front and make friends. Don't be the person who sits in the back and runs out, because then it's very easy to stop coming. But if they expect you, like having a makom kavu in shul, right? They expect you there. It's very difficult to not continue going there, or to be a mentor to someone, partners of Torah. It's very easy. It's very difficult to not show up when you're the mentor. So when it comes to learning, the women who were really successful at it were not necessarily going to a kviu shiur. Some women work. I go every week, two times a week, but many find that scheduling is difficult. But what was more successful is on commutes, or when they had spare minutes for a longer commute. One woman was telling me that she listens to Rabbi Akiva Tatch. She has a 45 minutes, or Rabbi Victor Miller, or Shira Smiles, and a shorter commute. Somebody recommended Torah Alive in 5.com that has very short shiurim. Learning on the phone with the Rebbitzen, learning with women who are in the same profession. So a woman recommended, I learned while nursing, except when my kid got a little older and they started getting distracted, so I couldn't have the book there. So all these formats, whatever works, do it. It's a subjective thing. The key is to stay connected. That's the key. However it works, to find a way that it works. Most important when you learn something that's relevant and something you enjoy. It should be relevant in what you enjoy. Some women told me they learn 2 lessons a day in living emunah. At least 3 times a week they learn on the phone together. Some learn the Chavetz Chaim book on Shmiras Halasha. And so those were all ways of keeping connected through learning. When it comes to non-learning ways, a number of women said, I have no way to be learning during the week. I'll quote one of them. He says, other than davening and benching, I don't have the opportunity to do anything Jewish all week. But when it comes to Shabbos, she said she's very strict about going to shul. And it was amazing. She said, I'm very strict to take all my kids because I need to show them just as important as it is that I work during the week. If not more important, it's that we go to shul and stick with our shul. And just as committed I am on the job, I need to be even more committed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amazing, inspiring.
Rabbi Ari, it was a wonderful having you. Rabbi Ari Wasserman, the author of Making It Work, Women Surviving and Thriving at Work.
I just do want to mention that it's important to note that the secular workplace is not all problems and challenges. There are unbelievable opportunities for Kiddush Hashem and making mitzvahs and staying on track and staying connected. And I just want to mention some anecdotes in that vein. There was a programmer who worked at Oracle that was talking about how she davened mincha in a stairwell, and she found the best place because it was between 2 companies. It was Oracle below and another company above. So she found the ideal place for great kavanah on that stairwell. There was an oncology doctor who talked about listening to shiurim back and forth on her commute. A podiatrist trained in London who works in Yerushalayim now, who talks about her challenges or her opportunities in cutting nails of the feet of her patients, and she was
was very strict. Some are makbid to cut it in a certain order, and some don't care, but she's makbid. She's strict to cut the nails in the order based on Pi Kabbalah to make sure that everyone was happy. And in addition, just to read an unbelievable anecdote that I received from the doctor who was working in the emergency room. She talks about how she stays connected and how important her tefillah is. So she says as follows: in general, practicing medicine can be stressful, but every tefillah is a chance to daven for all of my patients and for myself as an emissary of Hashem in their healing. When I stand in front of Hashem on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and recite Unesana Tokef, I can think of a patient. For each example of divine judgment, I see the hand of Hashem. In the trauma patient who got mere scratches while another passenger in the same car did not survive, I can sense the presence of the Shekhinah in those still moments when I am trying to feel the pulse of a patient whose heart stopped. And then I feel such gratitude for being able to bring babies into the world. What a gift. So I think in a departing message, it's very important that we know that there are challenges out there, but there are opportunities. And through my conversations with the numerous women I spoke about in preparing the book, I would say that they are doing an amazing job and maintaining who they are, and certainly their strength of character very much came through.
Thank you very much for your time. We have on the phone with us from Yerushalayim, Rebbitzen Tzipporah. She's a very famous speaker. She is the principal of Benos Avigail. She's a teacher in Neve, Yerushalayim. She's a writer for the Hamodia, published many books, including Battle Plans. She herself was a Talmidah of seminary in Bnei Brak in America. Welcome, Rebbitzen Heller.
Shalom, shalom. So today's talk is going to be on women and learning. This is, of course, by the nature of things, to a teacher, a very exciting and interesting topic.
Okay, so let me start some questions. So,
sure.
We've spoken about, what men should do post yeshiva. We had on some very well-known rabbanim, Rosh Yeshivas, etc. And the question is, should women be learning? I mean, the whole concept of women learning is a bit controversial. Certainly by the Chassidim, it's not accepted. It's rather new. It's the better part of, 100 some odd years since Sarah Shanira. So the question is, should women be learning post-marriage, post-graduation, going to work? And if you think yes, do women need inspiration? And what should they be learning?
So women have always learned, as we all remember from Chumash. Moshe taught the men, Miriam taught the women. There was never a time when women didn't learn. The question is, of course, formal education for women. But nobody could possibly know if they don't learn. People are in the world to serve Hashem, to bring light to dark places. People have enormously good intentions and fail at this miserably if they don't know. That's why Torah is called light. You can't know if you don't learn. The question is the formality of learning and what to learn. So formality of learning, as you mentioned, is not an ancient practice. However, learning is. So there was a time when women learned experientially, when they learned through osmosis what they saw taught them. That time is, of course, no longer today. And the need to learn from a sefer or through a teacher is universally accepted in the Jewish world. Women don't stop needing inspiration because they get married. They don't stop needing inspiration because they work. What a woman should learn should be whatever her, which of course varies from woman to woman. But the need to stay inspired is very deep. This is why, and people know this instinctively. In virtually every frum area, there is shiurim for women. They're well attended. They don't give a woman a degree. They sometimes even cost money, but they're well attended. And this is because the basic recognition that staying inspired is important is something that we all have come to realize.
So what do you think women should learn?
There are two basic categories. One, as I said, the need to know. There are women who, for various reasons, have limited background and have to know. But they're all in the most basic sense. But also knowing is a continual process. So again, when you look at what women choose to learn, a person should learn mashali bochofet, what speaks to him. So in women's shiurim, that again are popular every place where there are frum women, one basic topic will be halacha. Women go to shiurim on Hilchos Shabbos, on Shmiras Halashon, or whatever halachos they feel that they would like to have greater information, more solid information upon, or a reminder on what they once knew. But there was also a need to stay inspired emotionally, to stay inspired spiritually and intellectually. And for that, as I said, different women have different needs and different interests. But the shiurim that women are drawn to in today, in Musar, in Chassidus, in Hashkafa, all reflect this need.
Okay, so how would a woman, your average working girl in New York or in I don't know what it's like in Eretz Yisrael, it doesn't seem to be a very established network. Could you, a girl who doesn't have a local share, can you think of a particular sefer? Give us some practical guidance.
So it's hard for me to picture a place where there isn't a local shir, but assuming a person doesn't have the time to go to the shir, or it's such a busy day that going to a shir would be a ridiculous question. There are so many things that people are drawn to. As I said, the main things that draw women, and people should learn what they're drawn to, would be in the areas I just mentioned, which would be, again, Musar, Hashkafa, and Chassidus. These are the areas that women want to hear, because this is what will change them toward them from the inside.
Now, it's interesting, you mentioned, Rebbitzen, that women always learned and it's supported. If you look at many of the Chassidish Rabbanim, and I'll quote, let's say, the Divrei Yasif, he brings from the Yerushalayim, Yisrafu Divrei Torah, v'lo yimsru Divrei Torah l'nashim. He says it's better you should burn the Divrei Torah. So it is clearly, somewhat of a disagreement between, let's say, the Litvish and Chassidish circles, whether women should or shouldn't be learning, or whether they are allowed to learn.
So in the many Chazalim, that's just what you're bringing, of course, from a recent authority, certainly learning Torah Shebal Peh has been discouraged historically. By Torah Shebal Peh, I don't mean Pirkei Avos, I don't mean, again, Divrei Musar, Divrei Chasidus, Divrei Machshava, but the Masa Matan and Gemara, the Shakla V'Tarya. Historically, that's been discouraged and spoken against very strongly. And in any case, this is not a lima that women on a basic level are drawn to.
Yeah, but Chassidim are even against
women.
Wait, but
Chassidim
are against even women learning Ramban or learning Midrashim, and they quote this Yerushalmi as a proof.
Yes. So today there's no major Chassidic community that doesn't have a girls' school. Not only because education is required by the law, even before, certainly there was before it was required by the law.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, Rebbitzen Heller.
Okay, shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. We have on the phone with us Rabbi Nesanel from Yerushalayim, who's a Rav and an educator. Welcome to our program.
Thank you. It's an honor.
From Nesanel, I want to ask you a number of questions. Women today go out to work. They support the family, they support their husbands, etc. And many believe that, we've had on our program those who believe that they're not being adequately, fortified. You go into a secular workplace, and schools don't really teach them how to deal with secular environments and the issues of pretzes, kashrus, etc. Do you think that we should be, how do we, so let me put it this way, how do we fortify our sisters, daughters, etc., B'nai Yisrael? They don't have a minyan 3 times a day. They don't have daf yomi. How do we give them the moral, fortitude to remain with the same level of Yerushalayim in a very, difficult workplace?
That's a very very good question. Really, there's a preliminary question is whether we should be encouraging or discouraging going out to work in such places. But definitely this is a very big problem. This is perhaps maybe the biggest issue today especially in Israel. I'm more familiar with Israel than elsewhere. And it's a tremendous problem because, like the Rambam says in the beginning of the 6th parak of Hilchos Deif, it's human nature to be influenced by your surrounding environment and culture and value system. And the only way to protect yourself really is to, culturally isolate yourself and insulate yourself. And that's a very tall task when you're 10 hours a day sitting with them. It's a tremendous problem. I really don't. Of course, the answer would be along the lines of making sure the workplace does allow you to isolate yourself and to insulate yourself, and always remember that there's us and them. Never try to emulate them or feel inferior to them or be enamored by their value system or by their culture. This of course is just in a nutshell the headings of what would have to go into that. But the better solution would be if we wouldn't have to go to those places.
But I would agree with you. I think everybody would agree with you that the better solution is not to have to go. I mean, if we could work in a wonderful environment, it would be excellent. But unfortunately, we often don't have those options. It's like, you have to go where the job, if you're trained in a certain field, you have to go where the opportunity is. And if there's no wonderful environment that has the opportunity, and the only other option is your family, not meeting its needs. So I think everybody would agree that or at least many people would agree that it's a b'diavad. So the question would be should we be having maybe better shiurim for women? Should we be, for many generations, women didn't learn Torah Shabbal Peh at all. And then the Chafetz Chaim wrote a famous letter, as did the Znaim Mishpat. He said, the world, it's become a very irreligious place. And we can't teach our daughters everything, but the only thing we're not allowed to teach them is Torah. Do you think that, given that the challenge that women have today, we should be loosening and we should be looking at the Chafetz Chaim more as a role model? Yes, you should be learning more machshava. You should be learning, Chassidus. You should be learning the things that will give you the tools to remain Bas Yisrael in these environments.
I don't think we should be loosening anything. We should be strengthening and even more than in the past, because the dangers are greater, and we really face unprecedented dangers that our previous generation never faced. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be learning Chassidish and Machshava. Perhaps we should, but that's not what's going to help us isolate ourselves, protect ourselves, shield ourselves from foreign influence. That might make us, even if we had better workplaces, even if we didn't have to go to work, even if women could be just wives and mothers like in the good old days, even then we should be learning these things perhaps. But I don't think that would be a solution for the problem as it exists today.
Okay. Do you think women should be? We'll cut this piece off. Are you on a speaker or on a handheld?
I have a earphone.
Okay, but if you would speak more into the thing, it would be easier to hear you.
Okay. Is it better now?
Much better, yeah, absolutely better.
Oh,
and
okay.
This will get thousands of listeners. We'd like to hear what people don't have to strain. Do you think women should be trained for higher paying jobs, or they should stick to babysitting, teaching, stuff like that? Or because you do see in America, trained women are basically all kinds of medical fields. They're physical therapists, occupational therapists. You have women who are becoming doctors, lawyers, and many of let's say even in Lakewood, many of these ladies are supporting their husbands. Do you think that's a positive or a negative trend?
There's nothing negative about having a good paying job, but in general, we have to.
I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, I'm just rejecting that call. In general, we should realize that all of this going out to work is a b'diavad. The reason that today it's so acceptable in Western culture is because Western culture doesn't value mothering and being a homemaker. Western culture values politics and business and high-end salaries and power. And for in Western culture, being a mother and a homemaker is like being unfulfilled, and it's not satisfying. But our own hashkafa should be that the best thing in the world and the most important thing in the world and the most satisfying thing in the world is to be a Yiddish mame, a Yiddish tochter, to give your family tender, loving care, to protect them and shield them from foreign influences. This should, unfortunately, we can't pay mothers high-end salaries, but they actually deserve them.
Yeah, but Rabbi Nesanel, realistically, in the Haredi community, which I'm part of, the rate of mothers working is probably higher than in any other community.
Agreed.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that that's a Western. I would say that that's a Western thing. I think Fakert is that women see it as an achrayus to their family and to their husbands, certainly those who are staying and learning to work. I don't think that was inherited from the Western culture. I think that's something that we see as a necessity for certainly for the Khal system, and on a greater level to those large family system.
Two people could be doing exactly the same thing for two very different reasons. If we're doing it just simply as a necessity, then there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, I feel that maybe on the fringes, or maybe sometimes those fringes are a little wider than they should be. But some people are doing it not only as a necessity because I want my husband to learn, which can also be debated whether the price we're paying for a husband staying and learning is worthwhile. But sometimes, at least I feel in some cases, the women that are doing it aren't doing it only because it's a necessity, because we have to provide for our family, because our husband is learning, or because for whatever reason he's not earning enough, but because I don't feel satisfied with being just a mother.
Now,
and that,
Rabbi Nesanel, let's go through that, okay? When you say just a mother, don't you understand? I mean, you have today women on the Supreme Court, right? You had women presidents, prime ministers, well, not presidents in the United States, but in other countries, prime ministers, etc. I think 3 of the Supreme Court justices today are women. Don't you understand that a bright person could become intellectually frustrated with taking care of kids all day, changing diapers and cooking meals?
Yeah, I can understand where that comes from, but it's properly nurtured, very, very bright and intellectual woman should not become frustrated from that, because she should realize that she's doing the most important thing in the world. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's not a challenge.
Rabbi Nesanel, let me ask you a question. Let's say, for argument's sake, the most important thing in the world was to be a shoemaker. There was a tremendous shortage of shoes, right? Could you see an intellectual saying, look, I know it's the most intellectual job in the world, but I'm actually going out of my mind fixing shoes?
Yes, but there are other. If all a woman is lacking is intellectual fulfillment, she could be studying nuclear physics from books. She could be reading. She could be an autodidact. There's many things she can do, but the career, the position, the fulfillment that comes from the high-end salary, that comes to a certain extent from foreign influence, in my opinion.
Wait, but Rabbi Nesanel, don't you recognize that people come in many different flavors and have many different needs, and one person, it's intellect. One woman has absolutely a drive to do something with her hands. One person wants to be sales. I mean, do you think that really all people are cut out to be mothers?
All people are,
or all women are cut out to, or alternatively, do you think all men are cut out to be Rosh Yeshivas or Dayanim, or do you think
certainly
that
not? Certainly not.
So can we appreciate that there are women who have business skills, who have speaking skills, who have transactional skills, who have medical skills, and they want to fulfill that?
You can use your speaking skills as a teacher, as an educator, as an orator.
Wait, so that's already, but an educator is already far from being a mother. So now we're past mothering.
Of course, no, but of course we also need teachers. I'm just saying, but
okay. So let's continue. I accept that. Now, do we understand that there are people who they can't get their fulfillment from mothering, or at least they can get a little fulfillment, but otherwise they'd be going out of their minds, and they want to teach. Okay. Now, can you also understand that there are women who say, I just hate teaching. I'm not a teacher. It's one of 64 different major profession lines. I have a real interest in science. I'm mathematical by nature. I'm scientific, and I really enjoy doing something in the science field. Can you understand that?
Of course, but there's no question about that. But she can do that without becoming officially a mathematician or a physicist in NASA.
So she can study math at home?
She can, if what's really driving her is a thirst for knowledge.
But more than a thirst for knowledge, Rabbi Nesanel, some people it's a thirst for knowledge, and some people it's a thirst for being active and running around, and some people, there are so many different types of people. One person likes to think, and one person likes to do, and one person likes to teach, one person likes to entertain. I mean, Myers-Briggs has 16 major personality types and 64 below them. I mean, are we going to put all people into into one of those 64 and say, "Hi, you're a mother or a teacher"?
No. All of those 64 can reach full fulfillment in the good old-fashioned way,
which is
being, which means your role, your main what's the word I'm looking for? Your main occupation through the day is mothering. That doesn't mean you have to be, if you can afford it, you can get help to do the menial tasks. But it's mothering is not just diapering and washing dishes. Mothering is giving tender, loving care. There's no substitute for that.
So let me ask you a question. You think let's say Golda Meir could have had her fulfillment by being a mother?
Of course.
And let's say Marie Curie, who one of the great scientists who invented the Nobel Prize winner, who invented the cures of many diseases. She could have had her fulfillment by being a mother.
She would have been much better off. I think she died childless, right?
And Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England, would have been better off as a mother.
Of course, they would all be better off as mothers.
Oprah Winfrey, a mother.
Would they be better off as mothers? Society at large would be better off if we had better mothers and more full-time mothers, because all of the problems in society, at the end, at the core, all boil down to a lack of attention, to a lack of tender, loving care, to a lack of Yerushalayim instilled in the tender years. If we would have better mothers, we would need less doctors and less psychiatrists and less policemen and less judges.
But let me ask you, if there are 64 different general fields of professions, and for men we say, okay, any one of these 64, whichever one you have an atiyas hadefesh for, go for it. And yet women should all somehow miraculously all find that same fulfillment from the one field.
No, I specifically said that isn't so. They can do whatever they want, but they should realize that everything else is secondary to their main role as a mother and a wife.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying. And I'm saying that some of the things that we see today are driven, not explicitly. They're not going to say it because it doesn't sound good, it doesn't come across well. It's they'll muffle it with sophistication and excuses. But I think that some of it today on the fringes and growing really come from a need to prove to themselves and to the world that they can do things that were traditionally done by men. And that is a foreign influence.
You're saying that when a woman has a desire to be a jurist, like you have Justice Sotomayor, it's not because she has an intellectual interest in justice. She has an intellectual need to debate, to come to truth. It's because she's trying to prove to the world that she could do a man's job. I'm
not talking about anybody specifically, and I'm not saying that it's only that. And also in the general population, it's different than within our own community, because for them this is already not a barrier to overcome, because it's already, the field is open. But I'm just, in general, feminism in general today is certainly driven by a need to prove to the world that women can do what men have always been doing. Then this is taken to extremes. Here in Israel, not only here in Israel, but here in Israel, there's an extreme example of that. They sometimes deny even physiological gender differences. They even attempt to do away completely with gender. And here in Israel, there was an extreme example for the exalted sake of proving that women can be combat soldiers, and having as many women as possible in combat units in the IDF, because objectively women, the muscle mass of women and the stamina of women is lesser than that of men. And on average, of course, everything I say is on average. There could always be exceptional cases. Also, for your previous question, I'll get back to that later, there can always be exceptions. But in general, on average, women do not have the stamina of men, and they can't compete with men in these combat units. So what do? We lower the bar. We weaken the army, and we lower the bar to get accepted into these elite units, because we have to prove that women can be in these elite units. So, of course, this is an extreme example, but I'm saying to a certain extent the motivation, the intent of some of these initiatives that we see within the frum community come from the same paradigm of feminism, of egalitarianism, trying to prove that we can do anything you can do, we can do better.
But you don't think it's because of a need for people to express themselves, and the fact that men have gotten to certain fields first doesn't mean that a woman wouldn't be interested in being a doctor or a nurse or something?
She could be in this. First of all, we need doctors. We need women doctors.
But she's doing it because you feel that she's doing it because she's trying to show men.
I didn't say that about any specific woman. I said in general.
I understand that,
trend,
but in general, women who want to be
trend,
because
the trend is partially driven
that she could do what a man could
do. The trend, as a trend, is partially driven by the wrong reasons.
Okay.
Insofar as it's driven by good reasons, and especially when you come to things like pikuach nefesh and medicine and being a doctor. Ideally, we need women doctors. Ideally, women should be treating women, and not men. Male doctors should not. We don't need male gynecologists.
Rabbi Nesanel, let me ask you a question. Well, going along that, do we need men? We don't need male gynecologists. Do we need men seminary teachers? What's your opinion of that?
Preferably not, but certain things, certain sometimes, exceptionally, for halacha or for you want to have a special yontiv lecture or something like that. Of course, ideally on a steady basis, it would be better off if women should be teaching girls, not men.
Let me ask you a question, Nesanel. Do you think? I get invitations all the time, wedding invitations, and the woman's name is missing.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
I don't see any problem with that. A name today. This is also an example of Western culture. In Western culture, when you call up any company, the first thing you hear is the person that answers you. They give you their name, because Western culture is very, very extroverted.
So, but the man's name, but the father's name is on the invitation. Why shouldn't the mother's name be on the invitation?
Okay, but because women. But if we understand that a name is something intimate, something very personal, something that shouldn't be flaunted around to anybody, and like we have sometimes you still have this even in English, this idea of a first name basis relationship. So we want to understand that a name is something that is personal and intimate. Of course, there can be differences between men and women, because for women, women need to protect their tznius more than men.
So let me ask you. So do you think that when the Torah says, Avram, starting with Adam and Chava, we have Avram and Sarah, Yitzchak and Rivka, do you think it should be taken out?
No, of course it shouldn't be taken out. You're taking that to an absurd. These are our matriarchs. There's nothing wrong with the name. Some women are well known by their first name, but you see later the Shvatim, we don't have their sisters' names, their wives' names. There's no purpose. You see, exactly. This is a good example of women thinking it's not fair that the man's name is there and my name isn't there. That's exactly you expressed very well this feminist egalitarian objection to this practice.
So then, why? I'm curious. Why do you feel that Sarah Imenu was less tzniistic because her name is in the Torah?
No, of course not, because she's a matriarch. She's our mother.
Okay, so let's not.
But this woman on the invitation.
I'll give you another. I'll give you 20 other women that are named in the Torah. You have Hagar, Serach bas Asha, Yocheved, Miriam, Elisheva bas Aminadav, Tzipporah, Rachav, Yal, Devorah, Nomi, Chana, Abigail, Basha. Do you think that there's something missing with their tznius to the fact that they're their names?
Of course, names are sometimes necessary and mentioned.
So do you think when a mother is marrying off her child, do you think it's worth mentioning that she's the mother of this child?
Everybody knows that. It's not about mentioning.
So why can't her name? Everybody.
Whoever knows her also knows her name. But flaunting her name, that whoever doesn't know her.
If you say somebody's name, is that flaunting a name? Like, are they wearing their name on a? Hi, I'm the mother of this child. Is that flaunting the name?
If you have your name on your kippah, that's flaunting your name.
Right. Is your name on an invitation saying, I, Sarah, the mother of Yitzchak, invite you to the wedding? Is that flaunting the name?
There's no necessary. He doesn't need to know. The person
so
getting invited.
I'm asking you, why do all these women in the Torah, why isn't it flaunting their name?
I'm telling you, because in the Torah we need to know. First of all, we don't always understand why the Torah finds it necessary.
It doesn't have to say. Many times it doesn't say. Why do we have to know who Sarah's name is? It could say Eshes Avram.
Because she's our major. No.
So why do you have to know the name for?
No. I think you're being.
Why do you have to know the name?
You
have the Shunamis. It doesn't say her name. Right? You have many women in the Torah known as Eshes Avinoim. It doesn't say the name.
But our matriarchs, we need to know their names.
Okay.
And more importantly, that we need to know their names. There's no reason not to know their names.
So why is it the reason not to know the name of the bar mitzvah boy?
I'm telling you, because if I'm inviting everybody in my community, all the families in my community, which are comprised of men and women, all the men in the community until now did not know my first name. And they have no need to know my first name.
And that's bad if they. And is it bad if they know your first name? Like, is it toxic to know who your name?
It's not toxic, but it's
dangerous to know her name.
It's not dangerous, but it's
not theistic to know her name.
Compromising part of your intimacy.
It's compromising your intimacy if you know her name.
Yeah, because you don't. Why do I need to know her name?
No, why do you need to know anybody's name? It's just a way of identifying somebody. But it's compromising. It's compromising or intimate. You're getting intimate with somebody if you know their name.
Not getting intimate. I didn't say that. I don't put words into my mouth.
Okay.
But I'm saying now you know something intimate about her.
You know something intimate. You know her name.
Yeah. This in our culture, in Jewish culture, you don't. When I meet somebody in the street, I don't say hello. My name is Nesanel. I don't do that. Once I get very friendly with him, I will tell them.
There's a difference between walking over to somebody in the street and introducing yourself.
No, not only
somebody who you know, knowing that, or somebody knowing somebody's name, right? You don't see a difference in that?
You can know it, but again, I'm not saying this.
Let me ask you a question, Reb Nesanel. What background are you? Chassidish, Litvish? How would you say?
Chassidish.
Okay, so let's go Chassidish. Here's an invitation.
I just want to give you a better example of what I said. It's not only about when you meet somebody in the street. If I call up AT&T for customer service, they'll tell me, "Hello, my name is Jack." Why do I need to know your name?
This is a cultural. You say hello, Jack.
I can say hello. I can say thank you without. They usually don't even give you their real name.
I'm just showing you that in the Torah you don't have to know any of their names. It could be a Shunamis. It could be Eshes Avram, Eshes. So we have changed. Okay, so I'll prove it to you, Reb Nesanel. I'll prove it to you. Okay.
You're intentionally taking it to an absurd. You can take anything to an absurd.
Reb Nesanel, let me try to prove it to you. Here's an invitation from the Sanzarov's daughter. It's signed. Fega Bela Halberstam.
You didn't discover America.
Reb Nesanel, which Paisik do you consider the last generation?
It's not about Allah.
Yosef Shalom El Yashiv, right? And his wife Chaya Musha. I'm sorry, his wife Shana. I'm not talking about halacha. I'm talking about what you're saying. It's Western culture and it's coming from foreign. And I want to read a bunch. Moshe Vasima Feinstein. Was he a secular person?
You made your point excellently.
Okay.
I'm trying to defend this practice. I'm not thinking it has to be so. I never said there's anything wrong if somebody doesn't do that. But the reason they feel, because circumstances change. Today maybe people are more. In the past, I remember when I used to go on an airline, the stewards and stewardesses used to have their name on their name tag. Today they don't. For some reason, it could be because we're much on a much lower level and there's much more perversity. Maybe they decided to be even more protective. I don't know. Well, I'm saying that there's nothing wrong with this. The fact you just
wrong. Let me go to that point.
You just proved that there's a feeling of that this is not fair. This is not egalitarian. There's something wrong with doing this. We never attack anybody that doesn't do this, but you're attacking those that do this.
Right, and let me tell you why.
Because you feel there's something unfair.
No, I'll tell you. Hello, this is a halacha program, a Torah program. I'm not talking about general fairness. Let me read you a pasuk in Tehillim. Yirbu atzvaisam ubal esa eshmoisam al sfasai. It's to Zayin Daled. What does the Radak say? Bad people, you know how we treat them? We obliterate their names. It's brought in halacha too. You're not allowed to say the name of an avodah zarah. The worst thing you could say, what do we do about Rishayim? We say, don't mention their name, blot them out. So anonymity.
It's not about blotting out.
Hello, anonymity, right? Not mentioning the person's name. When we talk about Mordechai, we say Ben Yoyer, Ben Shimi, Ben Kish, Ish Yemini. So somebody's name let me finish. Is a sense of respect. When you say excuse me and you don't know the person's name, anybody will know, it's a sign of disrespect. That means you're not worthy enough. So when you take half of the Jewish population and we say from now on, you brought this kid up, you nursed him, you sent him to yeshiva, we're not going to put your name on the invitation. I say to you, it doesn't come from the Torah. It doesn't come from the Gedolim of the last generation. I'm talking about Rabbi Yashiv, Rabbi Shlomo Zalman. The Stipler's mother signed on his invitation.
Ooh, we got it.
And
I got it. Really?
Let me give you
where you're coming from.
Know where it comes from? I'll tell you where it comes from. It comes from two worlds. It comes from the Muslim world, right, where women are considered an abomination. Right, a woman is
absolutely not.
In many of the female countries, let's take Saudi Arabia under the Wahhabi, they're not allowed to leave their house without an escort of a male. They have no voting rights. They have until recently.
So you're just proving my point that you see this.
Wait, let me finish. So it comes from the Muslim world, and to
it doesn't come from them. Nobody by us did it because
it's an influence. It's influenced from the Muslim world, and it comes from the Muslim world. It does not come from the Jewish world.
It comes from our culture, where we do everything possible to protect the integrity and the pride of women.
Right.
And anything that might be...
Until this generation, we didn't do it. So I'm saying this generation...
The worst generation...
I think the Stipler...
I gave you the perfect example.
Okay.
In the past, stewardesses used to have their names on their name tags, and today they don't. Obviously, because people abuse that.
Raya. From stewardesses, we have a raya... One would agree, you would agree today, Nesanel, that women are much more in the public sphere than they have ever been in history, right? So you take one example, found a stewardesses as a raya, as a makar to this. Why have our names and invitations, etc.?
You're being unfair to me. What I'm trying to show you is that even though in the past people did this, they changed because obviously I'm assuming it was abused. Maybe also there were instances where this was abused. You know, somebody called up the house, and now that he knows his first name, he said, "Can I please speak to Sarah?" I don't know what might have been. I don't have a criminal mind, but I'm just saying this certainly is not influenced by Muslim culture, and the very fact that in the previous generation wasn't done, it just goes to prove my point. For some reason, this generation feels that there's something more respectable by concealing the woman's name. And
so Baruch Hashem, you're saying after 3,500 years since Kabbalah Torah, this generation, Achsher Dara, and we
not
found something.
Exactly what I said. You're not listening.
We are fruma today.
This generation
because
is worse.
So we have decided a new element of tznius that was never needed before in history.
Exactly, never needed before, but today is needed. You don't have to agree that it's needed.
So do you think?
We didn't say there's anything wrong.
There are many other things that we could change because this generation is different. Like we sort of have a laissez-faire to start making changes and how Messiah because this generation is different.
It's not part of Messiah. This is a personal decision that every family makes when they print their invitation, whether they feel comfortable that hanging in shul, every boy and man should see my first name or not. And some women decided they would feel more comfortable if that wasn't flaunted around for everybody.
Right. So I'm saying, we today, we are Baruch Hashem able to make changes. Well, I think if for 3,500 years, if for 3,500 years we treated half of the Jewish people with what Chazal consider a greater element of respect, which is mentioning their name, and this generation we decided not to. So that's fine. I'm just pointing out that we have now set a precedent. We can now start making changes as needed.
Not in the Messiah. In our own personal, private interactions, we decide what to do, and if we feel uncomfortable, then we should. We do it. What's more comfortable and more respectable for us. The Torah doesn't mandate that you use your name whenever you can.
Well, I'm quoting you Allah. I'm quoting you a pasuk in Tillim, a Radak, a Medrash, a Tosefta, a Ramah, a Shulchan Aruch.
You're misreading those pasukim and those halachos.
Okay.
The pasuk is talking about when we want to deliberately and intentionally obliterate the name of Hashem. Nobody's doing
make somebody anonymous.
No, we're not making anybody anonymous.
We're just not putting not having somebody's name on their invitation is not anonymous.
They're not anonymous. They're Mrs. David Lichtenstein. That's a very well defined name.
Right, but she has no name of herself. She has no name of herself.
Even
the name of the husband is.
She has a name. She chooses not to use it right now.
Well,
for her own.
I don't know that she chooses. I don't know that she chooses anything.
Of course, she chooses.
Her husband chooses for her.
No,
societal pressure.
They choose together.
I understand. You're saying that the women all have the hand in these decisions to basically take their pictures out of paper, pictures out of papers and their names out of invitations. The women who are making this decision.
There's a proverb in Yiddish that says, the woman has to dance according to her husband's flute.
Right.
But she writes the notes.
You're saying it's the women's decision not to have their names in invitations and their pictures in papers.
Not only the women's. I didn't say men said. The man said, let's put your name in, and she says, no. It's a mutual decision. For whatever reason, it has nothing to do with obliterating or being anonymous. And I even showed you an example from American culture, from Western culture, that the concept of Mr. and Mrs. David Lichtenstein is a perfectly acceptable choice.
But I said to you that I agree with you, and I'll tell you what the thing is. That comes from a Gregorian, a Christian tradition, which was about belittling women. The women had no identity back to Victorian times outside of her husband. She was chattel. And in the Torah and by Khal Yisrael, we've never had that. The Rambam says, "Mechabda yoisem igufay." Right? Kama v'kama neziyos. Machlokes is exactly showing him how many neziyos there were. There were many neziyos.
There's no repeat every time all the names of women in the Torah. It's useless.
But more than that, the tradition of the Torah is when Avram didn't know what to do, what did the Rabbi Shalom tell him? Kol ma she'omer lecha Sarah shema b'kaila.
Exactly.
When Yitzchak doesn't know which son to bench, right? Who guides him in the right direction? He's totally blind.
Exactly.
Rivka does it. When Yaakov doesn't know what to do, he calls Rachel Leah. So Klal Yisrael has always respected the power and intelligence of the woman. The Christian world and the Muslim world have belittled it, and we in this generation have adopted a Christian and a Muslim. That's my suggestion.
A complete misrepresentation of what's happening.
Okay.
Just because something is a little different than what was done in the past generation does not prove in any way in the leaf that it's an adoption of Muslim or Christian ideas or values or abandonment of Jewishness. No, there was for whatever reason they feel more. This is more right for them, and this is what they do. And they don't, unlike you, they don't attack those that don't do it. They don't take issue with those that don't do it. They're not militant about it. They feel that this is this is more suitable for them, and that's perfectly legitimate. It has nothing to do with obliterating women or making them anonymous. On the contrary, it has to do about respecting women and making them more princely.
Reb Nesanel, thank you very much for your time.
It was my pleasure
speaking with you. Bye-bye.
Every blessing.
We have on the phone with us from Yerushalayim, Mrs. Penina Pfeiffer, who is a founder of the Beis Medrash for Haredi women. It's called Torah, which means obviously Torah, but it also means Tur Shalah, her turn, which is about Gemara learning for women. Mrs. Pfeiffer is a graduate of the Beis Yaakov in Sanz in Ezras Torah. She also went to Seminar HaYashan, was founded by Gera Chassidim. So far, everything is like right down the middle. She afterwards went to Malot, which was part of Benos Chava. Welcome, Mrs. Pfeiffer.
Hi.
So what inspired you to do this?
I grew up in a home where my father's a Talmud Chacham, and my mother's from a long line of Lithuanians, and all her uncles and brothers and whatever are all yeshiva, yeshivish. And I grew up with this understanding. It was very all-encompassing that Torah learning is the most important thing. Like, we do other things. My parents were open-minded, and we read, and we had music and everything, but the axis everything was around was my father's learning. So to me, it just seemed a natural thing for me to want to learn.
Now, historically, it's a little bit like Yentl. But historically, it has been the men's domain. So what changed?
Right. I don't know if anything has changed. Well, yes, things have changed. Basically, yes, for 2,000 years, Gemara was the domain of men with very, very few exceptions. There were always, in every generation, some exceptions. One of the things that, since I was very young, I wanted to know why it wasn't allowed, and my father taught me that it is allowed, and he showed me the whole sugya. My father's very into that, into showing the sources and having us understand things from the text. So I knew that it was not usher, that it was just, you could say, not recommended and definitely the domain of men. But unlike Yentl, we do the opposite. It's an all-women shiur, and the man teaches. I actually had like a debate with myself if I wanted a woman to teach or a man. But the women who can teach Gemara are not Haredi, and I preferred someone Haredi, and he's a Panovich graduate, so it's more yeshivish style learning.
How many women are part of this Beis Medrash?
So on average, at a shiur we have like 10 women. It's a circle of about 20, I would say.
So let me ask you something, Ms. Pfeiffer. What has changed in the last 2,000 years that women are more interested in learning Gemara today? Like you said, there have always been a few outliers, but it's becoming more common. What has changed?
Okay, it's becoming more common in the more modern Orthodox or the Tilumi world. In the Haredi world, it's still an anomaly. I think it's an extension of a change that happened already when Sarah Schneer founded Beis Yaakov. She was, by the way, my grandmother's cousin, so that's like my yichus, Sarah Schneer.
Friends in the family.
Yeah. So she basically, when she went to the Rabbanim, she showed them that this was like what had to be done for the generation, for women to acquire some kind of knowledge, and not just through their home and through tradition. And if you look at today's generation of women, I mean, I have a master's, and I'm not like unusual. Plenty of women are educated and know a lot about a lot of things, and then all of a sudden, when it comes to Torah learning, they know very little. I mean, Beis Yaakov does give you some type of an education, but it doesn't teach you to read a text, definitely not a Gemara. And And something about that seems like unbalanced, that you should be so knowledgeable in every type of subject. But when it comes to Torah learning, which is something that guides our life and something that a lot of women, at least in my world, give up a lot to be part of, to even if their husband doesn't learn forever, but even those, 5, 7, 10 years that women invest so that their husband can be more of a Talmid Chacham and more, So to me, it just seems a natural extension of that lifestyle.
Right. You say women can do everything today. They can get masters and degrees and go out and shop and build businesses, but one thing they're not allowed to do is learn. And that seems a little bit, which is really what drove the Chafetz Chaim, I believe, to be matir as well. Let me ask you a question. Do you think that you do it better than the men?
Again?
Do you think you learn Gemara? Do you think you learn Gemara on par or maybe better?
Oh, my answer is no, for a very simple reason. Men are trained from elementary school from a very, very young age, and they spend hours and days and lifetimes on these texts. And we, even though we're educated, intelligent women, we don't know Aramaic. We haven't learned Gemara ever. We start, the average age is like 30. It's a late start. We all have children and jobs and a lot of things to do, and it's only once a week. So, no, I know I'm never gonna, be a Talmid Chacham.
So now that the women are expanding their horizon and doing something that they haven't done before, do you think the men should be doing something they haven't done before?
If you mean helping out in the family and being a part of raising children, then yes. I think that's one of the big challenges in the changes that are taking place, is that men still don't see themselves as fathers the same way women see themselves as mothers, meaning as something that's part of who they are, not just something you come back to in the evening. I think that's a change.
And why do you think that should change? Like what's changed in the last 2,000 years that you think it should change now?
A lot of things, every generation has its challenges. It's not like before women didn't work, but today both men and women work in similar things. It's not like he's working in the field and she's, on some cottage industry at home. So it's just a reality that if a woman invests in a career and in an education and all that, and she wants to develop herself in that as well, as long as the huge amount of work is on women, and it's not even just the actual work, it can be the responsibility. Who's responsible for bringing the babysitter? Who's responsible for making sure that there's a cleaning lady? All those responsibilities, in the end of the day, they add up. And they add up to not being able to accomplish what you would otherwise.
And do you see that changing in Eretz Yisrael and society, that men are taking more responsibility?
Yeah, it's funny because I think it happened because of the Kolov. Like, you see Haredi men, because of their schedule, they have a break in the afternoon, so they end up a lot of times being the ones to take the kids from school. In Israel, the school ends very early. So unless it ends up at 1, and then you could extend till 4. That's what I used to do, because at that point my husband was working. So I would work till 4 and then run, pick up my kids. But a lot of people, they save the money of till 4 o'clock. Anyways, the point is they also take kids to the doctors and the dentist, and they're much more involved. Rav Kessler from Kiryat Sefer spoke about it recently, and he wasn't happy about it. He thinks it's the wrong direction, but he didn't have much of a solution.
Which is the wrong direction? The women working or the men helping with the kids?
The men helping.
So he felt the women. He was fine with the women working, but he was opposed to the men helping.
He actually wasn't fine with the women working. Like, he accepted as a reality that he can't avoid because somebody has to work, in most cases. And if it's not the men, then he prefers it's the women. But the issues he was bringing up was, mixed workplaces and the issues that come up with that, and the, women not being prepared for the situations that they'll face in the workplace in the Haredi system. So that's what he was talking about. And then he said something about how terrible it is that the men are cooking, and but the bottom line is that women who are supporting a family on tight budgets, it's a reality.
So have you run into animosity? Has your Khal received criticism, or is it pretty much people accept it?
First of all, it's a small thing. It's not 500 women. It's 10 women, 20 women. People don't make a fuss. No one's made a fuss. Let's put it that way. I don't, Chas v'shalom, want to antagonize anybody. It's really not the point. And it's just, women who come, open a Gemara for 2 hours, and that's what we do. I don't think like I'll run into opposition. I think the point when it'll be opposed is when if a Beis Yaakov, for example, would want to introduce it into their curriculum for the girls to learn Gemara, I think that would face a lot of opposition.
So if it became regimented and part of society, it would be one thing. But if it's just done quietly on the side, you feel that there won't be much. Which Masechta are you learning?
Kiddushin.
And which daf would you be learning?
I'm not sure. I don't remember which one I'm on. We do one a week.
And which topic you're learning?
Yeah, about slaves.
So you're learning the second para. Can you share a thought with us? Learning Daf Yud Zayin, rather, the end of the first para. Can you share a thought?
Can I share a thought?
I've never met a woman yet before who learns Gemara, and maybe you could share one of your chidushim.
Okay. It's actually this is something that I liked, but it's from Perek Aleph.
Well, you're still in Perek Aleph.
So there's a discussion about what requirements are to divorce a woman,
right?
And Beit Shammai says brings a lot of like all these more severe kinds of cases in order to get divorced, and Beit Hillel is like, if she burns his soup, then off with her head. And it always seemed to me like very harsh, that. But then when I looked into it, I realized that if you can divorce a woman for very stupid reasons or very small reasons, then a divorced woman is a legitimate person. Because, so she burns his soup, so she's divorced, big deal. But if you know that a divorced woman can only be divorced because she did something terrible, then that
it would be a scarlet
letter.
Shame. Yeah.
Exactly.
You know what they say over, some darshanim say to that. They say that sometimes a husband comes home and the dinner is burnt. You've heard this, right?
No.
That the dinner is burnt. He says, "Look, my wife. What could I do? She burns it. That's not a reason to divorce a wife. She doesn't know how to cook." Mm-hmm. Another time he comes home, she cooks great. Certainly not a reason. One time he comes home, and one of the portions, half the dinner got cooked. So she serves him the burnt part. She says, "Why are you serving me that?" She says, "I burnt your dinner, not my dinner." So Beit Shammai says, Beit Hillel says, "Afilu higdicha tavshilo," is the lashon. She burnt his dinner. If she burns his dinner, such a person, you really. Okay, so Ms. Pfeiffer, it's fascinating speaking to you, and I think your vart on Beit Shammai is certainly very, very millennial, very current, very thoughtful, and we wish you much hatzlacha in your kollel.
Thank you.
Well, last question, does it pay, by the way? Does your kollel pay?
No, I try to raise, it's in my home, I bring the food, and I try to raise a tuition to pay the magachir.
Well, thank you very much for your time. All the best.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Let's go to the chosen winner of this week's riddle.
This is Ken Shayowitz, and in respect to the question about why Katan could possibly be Malik near Hanukkah, where he can't do that for Kriyas Megillah, it could be the answer is that there's a difference between Megillah and Ner Hanukkah, that Megillah is midin Shomei Ka'ona, that you're being Motzi, so Katan, who's Trei D'Rabbanan, can't be Motzi a Gadol, who's Chad D'Rabbanan. But when it comes to Ner Hanukkah, it's not really Shomei Ka'ona, it's that there's a kiyum on the house to have a Ner Hanukkah, and his Katan, since he's Chayav D'Rabbanan, so his menorah is considered a menorah that will be Moti the bias in the mitzvah. Rav Yasher Ber Soloveitchik gave the same, explained the same chiluk in the same sif. The Shulchan Aruch says that an isha, a woman, could light Ner Hanukkah for the men of her house. And Rav Yasher Ber wrote in the letter to his father that's published in the Igros Grid that he saw the Sefer Turi Even, which belonged to Rabbi Kiva Eger. Rabbi Kiva Eger wrote in his in the margin a question why it is that according to the Bahag that a woman can't be motzi in Mikra Megillah because she's only chayav mitin afin hayubos ornes. Why is it that she could light a menorah according to the Gemara for the men of her house and to be motzi her husband? So he answers, this is what he said, that Mikra Megillah is mitin shomei ka'ona. So there's a difference in the level of the chiyuv that she can't be motzi according to the Bahag. But Ner Hanukkah is not a din of Shomei Ka'ona. It's that you're creating a menorah for the house. So as long as you're shaykh to the mitzvah, that can create a menorah that will be motzi all the bnei abayis. So it could be the same thing for a katan, that the Yesh Misha Omer, that a katan higil chinuch could be motzi, not meaning Shomei Ka'ona, but rather because since he's shaykh to the mitzvah, becomes a Ner Hanukkah to be motzi the whole house.